In 1959, Gordy borrowed $800 from his family and started a record label in a two-story house in Detroit. Within 5 years, that label, Motown Records, would produce more #1 singles than any company in America. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Gordy didn't invent that formula from nothing. He studied it. He absorbed it. He spent years in the 1950s watching, listening, and learning from a generation of R&B artists who built the exact musical architecture that Motown would later perfect. Call and response, emotional intimacy, gospel energy in a pop rapper, and a crossover sound that white radio couldn't resist.
Only you.
The artists in those early records mostly never saw the rewards they deserved, but their fingerprints are on every hit Motown ever made. Today we're counting down 10 of those forgotten 1950s R&B records that secretly built the Motown formula and the true stories behind every one of them. Number 10, the Orioles, Crying in the Chapel. 1950. Orioles were the first black vocal group in American history to have a genuine crossover hit.
You saw me crying in the...
Their 1948 debut single, It's Too Soon to Know, went to #1 on the R&B chart and number 13 on the pop chart, something that simply had not happened before for a black group making music primarily for a black audience. They also accidentally started a trend that would define an entire decade of American music, naming vocal groups after birds. The Penguins, the Flamingos, the Falcons, the Ravens, and later the Miracles, all of them followed the Orioles' lead. But it was their 1953 recording of Crying in the Chapel that proved the formula everyone else would spend the decade trying to copy. The song itself was written by a country musician named Artie Glenn, written specifically for his teenage son, Darryl, to record. The Orioles covered it and transformed it completely.
Where people are of one.
They hit #1 on the R&B chart and number 11 on the pop chart, outselling multiple competing versions from white pop acts on the same chart at the same time. They did it by doing something radical. They sang it like a gospel song. Lead singer Sonny Till's emotional tenor, wrapped in the group's wordless harmonies, took a country music composition and turned it into something that sounded like a prayer meeting in a southern church. Britannica later noted that the Orioles differed fundamentally from earlier black vocal groups who had performed primarily for white audiences.
Get down on your knees and pray.
The Orioles made music that spoke from the inside of their own cultural experience. That distinction, emotional authenticity over performance, sincerity over entertainment, became the absolute DNA of Motown's entire approach to artists and records. Elvis Presley covered Crying in the Chapel in 1960, and his version went to #1 in multiple countries. The Orioles' original was selected for the soundtrack of American Graffiti in 1973. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1995, recognized as the group that started everything. Gordy was a young man in Detroit in 1953. He was watching and he was taking notes.
Your burdens will be light.
Number 9, Etta James, The Wallflower. Roll With Me, Henry, 1955.
Hey, baby, this is what you'll have to do.
Etta James was 17 years old. That is the first thing you need to know about this story, and it is the most important thing.
Dance with me, Henry. You better dance while the music goes.
She was 17 years old, had recently moved from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and was singing in a girl group when she encountered Johnny Otis, the producer, band leader, and talent scout known throughout the R&B world as the godfather of rhythm and blues.
Henry, talk to me, Henry.
Otis heard her sing and immediately understood what he was dealing with. He gave her a new name on the spot, took her birth name, Jametta, and simply reversed it. Etta James, clean, simple, impossible to forget.
Better dance while the music goes on. Roll on, roll on, roll on.
Then he gave her a mission. Hank Ballard's raunchy R&B hit Work With Me Annie had been banned from virtually every radio station in America and had still gone to #1 on the R&B chart anyway because the black audience found it and loved it regardless.
Henry, you wait.
Otis told James to write an answer song, a song from the woman's perspective. She did it in a single afternoon.
Cling to me, Henry.
The resulting record, originally titled Roll With Me, Henry, was so direct and so frank that most radio stations refused to play it, even with the cleaned-up title, The Wallflower, a phrase that appears nowhere in the actual lyrics.
Get out of your feet, you got to dance with me, Henry.
It hit #1 on the R&B chart in April 1955. Then a white singer named Georgia Gibbs covered it, with the explicit lines removed, retitled Dance With Me, Henry, and took it to #1 on the pop chart.
Move and me, you better feel that boogie beat and get it leg.
Gibbs's version outsold James everywhere outside the R&B market. James received no mainstream crossover credit and no financial benefit from the pop success. She was 17 years old and had just been erased from her own hit. What Berry Gordy absorbed from watching this moment from a front row seat in Detroit was the single most important lesson in the entire Motown formula.
Henry, swing with me, Henry.
If you take the emotional core of an R&B song and polish its presentation just enough to reach white radio, without stripping the soul out of it in the process, you can have both audiences simultaneously.
Swing with me, Henry. Cling to me, Henry.
That razor-thin tension between rawness and refinement, between the church and the pop chart, is the entire Motown sound in one sentence. A 17-year-old girl taught it to the music industry in an afternoon, and the industry gave the credit to someone else.
Cling to me, Henry. Dance with me, Henry.
Listen, 90% of you watching these videos right now ain't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload. #8, The Moonglows, Sincerely 1954. Harvey Fuqua was one of the most important people in the entire history of Motown Records, and the overwhelming majority of people who have ever bought a Motown record have never heard his name. Born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1929, the nephew of Charlie Fuqua of the Ink Spots, Harvey founded the Moonglows in Cleveland in 1952 and connected with disc jockey Alan Freed, who brought them to Chess Records in Chicago. Their first Chess single was Sincerely, co-written by Fuqua and Freed and recorded in November 1954. It hit #1 on the R&B chart and #20 on the pop chart. The McGuire Sisters, a white pop vocal group, covered it for a mainstream audience and went to #1, but the Moonglows original was the version that mattered, the version that the industry took seriously. The group's sound was extraordinary, 5-part close harmony, rooted in gospel but polished to a velvet smoothness that made it accessible to any audience. It was spiritual but not preachy, romantic but not shallow, earthy but not explicit. It hit every crossover sweet spot that Berry Gordy would spend the next decade engineering deliberately. In 1957, Fuqua restructured the Moonglows entirely and recruited a new lineup of singers from Washington, D.C., a young vocal group called the Marquis. One of those Marquis was a 19-year-old drummer and vocalist named Marvin Gaye. Fuqua worked with Gaye for several years, mentoring him, shaping his sound, and teaching him everything he knew about vocal performance and musical arrangement. All you gotta do is be mine, 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 mine. He later moved to Detroit, began a relationship with Berry Gordy's sister, Anna Gordy, and married her. Through that marriage, he introduced Marvin Gaye directly to Berry Gordy. Gaye subsequently changed his name to Marvin Gaye, married another Gordy sister, and became one of the most important artists in the history of popular music. All you gotta do is be mine. Fuqua himself was brought into Motown as the head of its artist development department, the division that ran the label's famous charm school, training performers in etiquette, choreography, public presentation, and poise. He co-produced Marvin Gaye's landmark Sexual Healing in 1982, 28 years after Sincerely first charted on Chess Records. One song, one group, one man. A direct and unbroken human chain from a Chicago recording studio in 1954 to Hitsville, USA in Detroit in 1959. And it runs straight through Harvey Fuqua's front door. Number 7, Clyde McPhatter, A Lover's Question, 1958.
Does she love me?
Clyde McPhatter's voice was so genuinely extraordinary that when he left the Drifters in 1954 to join the United States Army, it took the group 5 full years to find a replacement lead vocalist.
It's a lover's question.
That is not an exaggeration. It is documented history. McPhatter had co-founded the Drifters himself after being handpicked by Atlantic Records founder Ahmet Ertegun, who had heard him sing with Billy Ward's Dominoes and knew immediately he was looking at something rare.
When we're kissing.
The Dominoes, incidentally, were the same group that a young Jackie Wilson would join after McPhatter's departure, meaning the same vocal chair passed from McPhatter to Wilson, two of the greatest voices in the history of American popular music, one after the other.
Question, I'd like to know.
McPhatter's falsetto was unlike anything else in R&B at the time, lighter than most tenor voices, more emotionally agile, more capable of expressing multiple feelings within a single phrase, tenderness shifting to desperation, joy moving into longing without a single awkward transition.
True to me.
Jerry Wexler at Atlantic Records understood precisely what he had and gave McPhatter the creative space to prove it.
I feel, and how am I to know it's really?
A Lover's Question was released in 1958, written by Brooke Benton and Jimmy T. Williams. Benton was so invested in the song that he sang the demo himself at Atlantic.
It's a lover's question.
Producer Clyde Otis loved the demo so much that he invited Benton into the actual recording session to help recreate the feel.
The answer lies. Is it in
the finger snaps you hear running through the entire record are Benton himself, present in the room, willing the performance into existence.
I'd like to know.
The song hit number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart, spending weeks on both, more than any other record on this list.
I'd like to know.
A Lover's Question is the precise template for the Motown ballad. The intimate, almost conversational delivery, the vulnerability framed as sophistication, the question addressed directly to one specific person rather than to the world in general.
I'd like to know when.
Smokey Robinson has cited McPhatter as a direct and conscious influence on his approach to writing ballads.
Where the answer lies.
Diana Ross's entire vocal persona, the emotional restraint, the delicate upper register, the sense of holding something back, owes an unmistakable debt to what McPhatter established in the 1950s.
I'd like to know.
He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987. He died in 1972 at 39 years old. The mainstream industry had borrowed everything from him and returned almost nothing. Number 6, Jackie Wilson, Reet Petite, 1957. The royalties from Reet Petite built Motown Records. That is not a metaphor or a loose historical claim. It is a documented financial fact that sits at the very foundation of the label's origin story. Berry Gordy co-wrote Reet Petite with his sister Gwen Gordy and their friend Roquel Billy Davis in 1957 for Jackie Wilson, a fellow Detroiter, whom Gordy had first met on the amateur boxing circuit in the city. Wilson had just left Billy Ward's Dominoes, where he had stepped into the vocal slot vacated by Clyde McPhatter and signed as a solo artist with Brunswick Records. Gordy brought him the song. Wilson later said the song was almost impossible to pull off, claiming only he, Bobby Lewis, or Screamin' Jay Hawkins could have done it justice. Wilson was not wrong. The performance was volcanic and almost inexplicable. Call and response with the brass section that sounded like a physical argument. Vocal leaps that seemed to defy the limitations of the human body. A swagger so effortless it bordered on supernatural. The song reached number 62 on the Billboard Hot 100, a modest American result, but reached number 6 in the United Kingdom, where Wilson's showmanship translated immediately across the Atlantic. But the business story matters as much as the musical one. The royalties Gordy received from Reet Petite and the subsequent songs he wrote for Wilson, including To Be Loved, That's Why I Love You So, and the enormous hit Lonely Teardrops, accumulated over 2 years into the financial foundation of what would become Motown. More importantly, the experience of watching Brunswick Records handle Wilson's money and creative output taught Gordy exactly how a record label could exploit its artists. He had seen it up close. He started Motown specifically to prevent it from happening to his artists and to himself. In 1986, 29 years after Reet Petite was first released, the song was reissued in the United Kingdom after a claymation music video was broadcast on British television. It became the UK Christmas #1 single of 1986. Jackie Wilson holds the official record for the longest gap in UK chart history between a song's original release and its reaching #1. The song that accidentally funded Motown ended up as the best-selling record in Britain the year that Berry Gordy's empire was at the height of its global reach. Number 5, Little Willie John, Fever, 1956. Little Willie John did not want to record Fever. His King Records producer, Henry Glover, had to persuade him repeatedly before he agreed. John was 18 years old, stood 5'4", weighed around 130 pounds, and possessed one of the most physically inexplicable voices in the history of American music. A full, powerful instrument that seemed to belong to a much larger and older man. He had recently scored a modest hit with All Around the World and was beginning to establish himself on the R&B circuit in Detroit, where Berry Gordy was watching him with close attention. The songwriting credit on Fever listed a composer named John Davenport, a pseudonym used by the actual writer, Otis Blackwell, because Blackwell was still contractually obligated to another publishing company and could not put his real name on the song. Blackwell, for context, was the same writer who composed Don't Be Cruel and Great Balls of Fire for Elvis Presley, two of the most commercially successful singles in the history of rock and roll. His collaborator on Fever was Eddie Cooley. Together, working around the contractual constraint, they created something stripped to near nothing: a bass line, a drum pulse, a melody in space. When you kiss me. John recorded it on March 1st, 1956. His version hit number 1 on the R&B chart and number 24 on the pop chart. Bless my soul, I love you. Spending 5 weeks at the top of the R&B listing and 23 weeks total on the chart, an extraordinary run for an independent label record in the era. When you kiss me, fever. Peggy Lee heard it, slowed it down to a burning simmer, rewrote most of the original lyrics without requesting permission or credit, and recorded her own version in 1958. Lee's version became her signature song and won her a Grammy nomination. Elvis covered it in 1960. Madonna covered it in 1992. Beyoncé covered it in 2003. The list of artists who have recorded Fever in some form runs well over 100 names. What Motown's production team specifically studied in John's original recording was its restraint. No strings, no background choir, no wall of orchestration, just a voice, a groove, and open space. That production discipline, the willingness to leave silence in a record rather than fill every frequency, became a key signature of the intimate, stripped Motown ballad sound. John died in prison in 1968 at 30 years old, convicted of manslaughter. Treat me right to give me fever. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996. The record he didn't want to make influenced the next 70 years of popular music. Number 4, The Drifters, Money Honey, 1953. Clyde McPhatter formed the Drifters in 1953 at the direct and specific request of Atlantic Records co-founder Ahmet Ertegun. Ertegun had heard McPhatter sing with Billy Ward's Dominoes and told his business partner Jerry Wexler, "This boy is the future of this company." I saw the woman that he built a new group entirely around McFadder's voice, recruited the other members himself, and put them straight into the studio. Money Honey was the Drifters' very first single, written by Jesse Stone under his pen name Charles Calhoun, the same prolific songwriter who had already written Coleslaw and Shake, Rattle, and Roll. The song hit #1 on the R&B chart in the autumn of 1953 and stayed there for 11 consecutive weeks. To understand what that meant in context, the records keeping it from going even higher were being pressed as fast as distributors could handle them. And Money Honey was outselling almost all of them, 11 weeks, in a market defined by 2-week chart runs and fast turnover. The song built its entire energy on a gospel call and response structure. McFadder's frantic, pleading lead vocal, answered by the group's deep harmonies, pushed forward by a guitar riff borrowed directly from the electric blues tradition. Elvis Presley was so transfixed by the record that he covered it in 1956 for his self-titled debut album on RCA, using it as one of the primary vehicles for his own transition from regional rockabilly act to national phenomenon. But the production model that Money Honey established is the piece of this story that connects directly to Motown. Jesse Stone's arrangement placed the rhythm section at the absolute foundation of everything. The bass and drums were not supporting the melody, they were generating it. The groove came first, and the vocals and arrangements were built on top of it. This rhythm-first architecture is the literal structural foundation of every Motown record ever made. The Funk Brothers, Motown's legendary house band, began every session from the bass line up. James Jamerson's bass never supported the song. It led it. That approach has a direct ancestor in what Jesse Stone and Ahmet Ertegun figured out in New York in 1953. The Drifters were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988. The record that started them is the record that started almost everything. Number 3, Ruth Brown, Mama He Treats Your Daughter Mean, 1953. Ruth Brown was so commercially essential to Atlantic Records in the late 1940s and early 1950s that the entire label was nicknamed the house that Ruth built. That is not a compliment paid casually. Between 1949 and 1955, she placed 21 singles in the R&B Top 10, a rate of commercial output that no other artist at Atlantic, male or female, came close to matching. She was the financial engine that kept the label solvent during the years when it was still building its identity and its roster. Without her chart performance, Atlantic Records almost certainly does not survive long enough to sign Ray Charles. Without Ray Charles, the entire trajectory of American popular music shifts. The chain of consequence runs directly through Ruth Brown. Mama He Treats Your Daughter Mean was released in January 1953 and hit #1 on the R&B chart, where it stayed for 5 consecutive weeks. The The song was produced by Ahmet Ertegun and Jesse Stone, the same team responsible for the Drifters' Money Honey, and co-written by Johnny Wallace and Herb Lance. But what makes this record historically essential is not its chart position. It is the way the record is constructed from the inside. Brown's vocal sits at the absolute center of the arrangement, with all instrumentation orbiting around her rather than underneath her. She is not being supported by the band. She is being framed by it. There is a fundamental difference between those two things, and Ruth Brown understood that difference instinctively. Her delivery on the song is urgent, direct, and completely unambiguous. She is not performing vulnerability. She is issuing a formal report on an injustice. The emotion is stated, not suggested. The power is in her certainty. Berry Gordy later specifically cited Brown as an influence on how he thought about presenting female artists at Motown. The label's artist development program, which trained female performers in poise, self-presentation, and commanding a stage, was built on the understanding that a female lead vocal operating from a position of authority was the most commercially and emotionally powerful instrument in popular music. Ruth Brown had proved that a full decade before Motown was founded. She was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993 and successfully campaigned for unpaid royalties from Atlantic Records. A battle that resulted in changes to how the music industry was legally required to account to its artists. Number 2, The Platters, Only You and You Alone, 1955. The Platters almost didn't make it to the recording session that changed everything. Their manager, Buck Ram, had negotiated a deal with Mercury Records, at the time one of America's most powerful major labels. But Mercury was not interested in the Platters. They wanted the Penguins, another act Ram managed, a white vocal group who had recently scored a crossover hit with Earth Angel. Ram refused to deliver the Penguins to Mercury unless Mercury also signed the Platters as part of the same contract. Mercury agreed reluctantly, without much enthusiasm, and almost certainly without any expectation that the Platters would amount to much. It was one of the most consequential package deals in the history of the American recording industry. You do, you're my... Only You and You Alone was written by Buck Ram and Andy Rand and had already been recorded once and rejected by a different label. And only you. The Mercury version was different because of Tony Williams. Williams was the Platters' lead tenor, a voice of extraordinary control and emotional precision, intimate enough to sound like a private conversation and powerful enough to fill an arena. You are my destiny. The recording hit #1 on the R&B chart in August 1955 and #5 on the pop chart. But the chart position understates what the record actually accomplished. My hand, This was the first time in American music history that a black vocal group performing in an unambiguously, unapologetically black musical idiom was accepted into the mainstream pop market without the song being covered, watered down, or sanitized by a white artist first. Destiny. The Platters crossed over on their own terms. and by their own standard of excellence. Gordy watched this moment with the same focused attention he gave to every record that broke the crossover barrier. What the Platters proved definitively for the first time was that a black group did not need a white artist to translate their music for a mainstream audience. They simply needed to be perfect. Destiny. That insight became the cornerstone of Gordy's entire production philosophy. The polished orchestration beneath a soaring lead vocal, the precision harmonies framing the emotion rather than overwhelming it, the sense that every note had been considered and placed with intention. This is the Platters formula, and it is the Four Tops formula. And the Temptations. Tony Williams created a vocal tradition that made Levi Stubbs and David Ruffin possible. The Platters were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1990. They proved that perfection was the only crossover strategy that couldn't be taken from you. My one and only. Number 1, Little Richard, Long Tall Sally, 1956. Gordy has said publicly on more than one occasion that Little Richard was the artist who most directly showed him what a pop record needed to accomplish in order to be truly unassailable. Not the most talented artist he ever heard, not his personal favorite, the artist who most clearly demonstrated the principle that would define every Motown record for the next 3 decades. And Long Tall Sally is the specific record that made the argument impossible to ignore. By early 1956, Tutti Frutti had already proven that Little Richard could cross over to the pop market. But Pat Boone had also covered Tutti Frutti with a cleaned-up version, and Boone's cover had charted higher on the pop side than Richard's original. Gordy watched that and understood the danger. If the music was coverable, it was vulnerable. A white artist with access to mainstream radio distribution could take a black artist's record, remove the most culturally specific elements, and deliver it to a broader audience, with the black original artist receiving none of the commercial benefit. This was not a theoretical concern. It was happening in real time, systematically, across the entire R&B market. Then, Long Tall Sally arrived in the spring of 1956, and everything changed. Richard had worked with his bandleader Bumps Blackwell to write a song so fast, so physically demanding to sing, and so vocally overwhelming in its execution that when Pat Boone went into the studio to record his obligatory cover version, it simply did not work. Boone's version was recorded and released, but radio stations across the country played Richard's original instead. For the first time, a black R&B artist had beaten a white cover version at its own game, not by making the music more accessible, but by making it more itself, by pushing the performance so far into its own energy that no imitation could follow. Long Tall Sally hit number 1 on the R&B chart and number 6 on the pop chart. Pat Boone's cover peaked at number 8 and faded quickly. Richard had won. The lesson Gordy took from this and applied to every Motown record he ever produced was this: you don't beat the system by playing by its rules. You beat it by being so good, so complete, so emotionally immediate that the system has no choice but to come to you. Every Motown single from 1960 onward was built on that principle. Little Richard proved it was possible in a New Orleans recording studio in 1956, singing so fast that nobody alive could keep up with him.